Welcome to Securing America with me, Frank Gaffney, the program that's a kind of owner's manual for protecting the country we love against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to God's glory and that of his kingdom. A man who has devoted his considerable and distinguished professional life to protecting the country we love is, I'm very pleased to say, both the chairman of the Center for Security Policy's Advisory Board and our first guest. Among other things, he has served as a distinguished member of Congress, during which time he was the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. He also has been the U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands, a place that he was born in. His name is Pete Hoekstra. We're never quite sure what to call him. I default to Your Grace. It's good to have you with us, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Chairman again. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Always good to be with you. Thanks, Frank. And as you and I talk frequently, Pete is just fine.
I know it is. We're going to call you that too in the course of this, I'm sure. Let's talk about an issue that our Committee on the Present Danger China, of which you are a new member, I'm very pleased to say, has taken on. And we talked a bit about it yesterday, but I'm going to be talking about it as long as it takes to fix a really serious threat, it seems to me. And that is, as you know, Congressman, we are looking at an enemy in the form of the Chinese Communist Party that is arguably the most dangerous we've ever faced. And there are people in this country, including financiers like Larry Fink of BlackRock, and apparently members of the board that oversees your pension plan, the thrift savings plan, the largest in the world, in fact, namely the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board, who are determined to have American government employees, past and present, military and civilian, put their money, their pension fund money, into Chinese Communist Party controlled companies. I'd like to get your thoughts on this. How on earth could this possibly be?
Well, I'm sure that the people at the Thrift Savings Board, they're looking at it and they're saying, hey, we want to give, the American federal government workers, we want to give them options, which is fine. But now they're looking at opening it up, I think, to something like 5,000 mutual funds. Um, and many of these funds will invest in Chinese companies uh, primarily who will be controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, working against the interest of the United States, probably stealing our intellectual property. And it's kind of like, yeah, go ahead, make it available to make the option available to federal government employees to invest in mutual funds, but only invest in those mutual funds that will certify that they are not going to invest any of those dollars into companies that are either controlled or affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party. Easy enough. Put in place the certification process and make sure that American taxpayer, well, that American government workers, their retirement savings are not invested in companies working against the best interest of the government and the country where they live.
Yeah, I think actually 2 points. One is all Chinese companies are by definition under the control of the Chinese Communist Party. And I think there is actually some amount of taxpayer funding involved in these pension funds. So it does apply both to the investors themselves and the taxpayers. But, Congressman, I guess I'm asking as well, how do we get to a point where people like Larry Fink, who manages, by some estimates, $10 trillion through BlackRock's various holdings, including the pension funds of an awful lot of states around this country, and manages the thrift savings plan, I believe, as well, at least substantially. Uh, People like him uh, believe that they can, in fact, put all of our money, those of us who are in the markets, into communist China with complete disregard for what you just said, the real danger that it poses to our country, that we're underwriting our enemy.
Well, what it's become is number one, it's an influence operation by the Chinese Communist Party to capture the interest in the investments of these folks. And once they've done it, they've pretty much locked them in place. And you see it with corporate America all the time. American companies that have become so invested, their business models have become so invested in China that they are silent. The NBA is a phenomenal example of this, where they're telling and silencing their own players to make sure you don't stand up for the Uyghurs. Heaven forbid that you stand up for freedom for the people of Hong Kong, or that you in any way criticize the Chinese Communist Party or the government of China, which, as you said, are one and the same. So you've got corporate America's locked up. All these people work together. They talk together. For Larry Flynn, it's the almighty dollar, and there's not a bit of nationalism in his worldview. This is why, in many ways, Frank, these elites really dislike Trump. It's for them, it's the almighty dollar, which, with their work, one of these days may, morph into the almighty yuan and the dollar. But they don't care as long as they're making money. And Donald Trump challenged that model and said, I'm gonna put America first, which was frightening to some of these people because they don't understand it. For them, it's about making money, and China has convinced them that the place to invest is China. And once they get their hooks into you, they've got you.
Right. Congressman, I just asked two questions based on your past experiences. One is the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Of course, you oversaw, among other things, our counterintelligence capabilities. Are they up to the job of even monitoring properly, let alone holding accountable people who have, in fact, become, well, for want of a better term, agents of influence for communist Chinese government? And secondly, talk a little bit about your experience on the Hill itself, where colleagues of yours were directly influenced by the Chinese, it seems, in a number of different ways, as well as, of course, through businesses operating in their districts or their states.
No, I mean, our counterintelligence efforts fall woefully short of the threat that we faced. For China, it is an all of government approach. It is an all of society approach to take down the United States of America. So, it's a military approach. It's a political information, disinformation campaign. It is a campaign that is run through their universities. We would hear stories where technologies and breakthroughs that were identified in our universities, they would be patented in China before we would ever have an opportunity to do it, because the intellectual property had made it over into, there was a direct feed into Chinese universities and Chinese businesses. And then you put that together with what happens from a technology standpoint, technology transfer from one business or an American business to a Chinese business. It happens here. We are targeted here. Our companies are targeted in China. Once they get there, it's kind of like, I've had multiple stories where they'll say, guy, we build our plant. And the next morning we wake up and we see that they're building a plant identical to the one that we are building, but it is a Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party facility that's going to be making exactly the same things that we are in our plant.
In some cases, they literally simply took the plans for everything from the product to the facility itself. I think there's even cases where they've taken the facilities lock, stock, and barrel from the United States and moved them to China. Congressman, we have to take a short break. When we come back, I do want to ask you about colleagues of yours, former colleagues, obviously now, and whether they too have been suborned by the Chinese Communist Party. That and more with Congressman Hoekstra right after this. We're back, and we are continuing our conversation with a distinguished public servant, a former member of Congress and former ambassador, Pete Hoekstra, also now the chairman of our Center for Security Policy's advisory board. Congressman, we were talking about the counterintelligence problem, the Chinese threat, the elite capture and influence operations. Talk a little bit about from your own firsthand experience on the Hill and what you've seen since you left, what the Chinese have been able to do within our political leadership as well.
Well, if you go back, in 2000, 2001 is when Congress was voting on whether to provide normal trade relations, which had previously been identified as permanent normal trade relations, preferential trade benefits with China. And I voted against it. It probably ended up being one of the best votes I ever cast in Congress, saying no to this. For some reason, I was smart enough at that time to say, you know what, China, I just don't trust those folks. And most of my colleagues ended up voting for it, believing that, hey, if we open up to China, they will change their behavior. And in reality, what we've seen in the last 20 years is that they have made their behavior much worse. Uh, you know,
And been changing ours, I
changing
think
our
it's fair to
behavior.
say. Yeah,
We've seen
especially
it.
on the Hill.
We've seen it. Peter Schweitzer in his latest book, I think it's called "Caught Red-Handed" or something
Just
along
plain
those lines.
red-handed, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and identified, the influence that they may have had on John Boehner, the Speaker of the House at the time. Uh, the Senate had voted to go after the yuan, and for some reason, the Speaker would never let that vote come up in the House of Representatives. Later on, we found out, and Peter Schweitzer identified that he was tied very, very deeply into China. We've seen the Eric Swalwell, the congressman from California, who now sits on the Intelligence Committee, still sits on the Intelligence Committee, who was compromised by a young Chinese woman. And so, whether
Honey
it's
trap, as they
yeah,
say. Yeah.
whether it's financial incentives, whether it's a honey trap or something like this, China will do anything and everything that they can to gain a little bit of leverage, which evolves into a lot of leverage over our elected officials.
Right. I fear some actually have an ideological predisposition to the Chinese Communist Party's philosophy as well. You add that into the mix, and it's an unbelievably important problem. We're going to continue our conversation about that in the days ahead, Pete, as it is not going away, alas. But I did want to turn to another topic that I think you've been doing some cutting edge research into and are beginning to raise appropriately warnings about. It involves the World Health Organization, an outfit that the Chinese Communist Party, as it happens, now controls. Um, a new agreement is being forged that would give it still more power, despite its abysmal performance under Chinese control, to be sure, in this coronavirus pandemic. Talk a little bit about what is in the offing here and its implications.
Well, their target, and they're looking for an international treaty, some form like that. But the timeline is straightforward. 2022, they're going to be gathering information, developing the proposals. 2023, they are going to present these preliminary findings to the WHO, a WHO assembly, as they call it, looking to approve an international treaty by 2024. So, this is a problem that to many may seem, well, hey, Pete, that's 2 years away. Now, that's a very, very short time in terms of international treaties and agreements. And really, what this is it's a massive power grab by the World Health Organization. Uh, you know, and I had a lot of experience with this organization, especially when President Trump pulled us out of that. I was serving as the ambassador to the Netherlands at the time, and then all of my colleagues in Europe, Australia, they said, Pete, you can't pull out in the middle of a pandemic. We need this organization. Yes, we know it is flawed, and we will hold them accountable and we will do an after action review once we get control of this pandemic. Yeah, trust us. Number one, none of those countries are asking for an after action review. None of them are working to hold the WHO accountable for its miserable performance and its adhering to the Chinese Communist Party line about this pandemic. Never holding China accountable for not sharing information with us, the seriousness of this pandemic and those types of things, and never going through and trying to find out exactly where this has come from. So there's no accountability to reform the organization. Yet, our allies, France, Germany, the Netherlands, they're saying they're moving ahead. They're moving ahead aggressively on.
But let's talk about what they're moving ahead towards, Congressman. It's a power grab in what respect and with what effect, do you think?
Well, yeah, here's what they're looking for. All right, I wanted to make, this is a relatively new topic. They want an international agreement that is legally binding and enforceable, meaning an international organization that is going to be able to go to some other international organization and say, this is what every country needs to do. This is what America needs to do and be held accountable to. So legally binding. They want it to be financed internationally. Okay, that's one of the things that I'm assuming they want legally enforceable. That every country needs to pay something. We know what that means. It means America pays. We pay for the UN, we pay for NATO, and these other countries never go. Then it talks about we need to develop more tools to anticipate and deal with a pandemic, and of course this will all be run by Tedros and the World Health Organization. Why? Because as he says, we are one humanity. We are one planet. We are one health organization. We are one WHO. It is a massive power grab. And in the voice of my former colleague, Rahm Emanuel, Tedros is not letting this crisis go away. He's going to take every advantage of it.
Go to waste, yeah. And Congressman, let me just be clear. In the event that there is another pandemic crisis, or perhaps a new outbreak of coronavirus, a new strain, new problem of some kind, what the World Health Organization has in mind, if I understand you correctly, is being able to declare not only a global emergency, but to dictate to nations what they're going to do about it, whether that's lockdowns or whether that's vaccine mandates or passports for mandates enforcement, or in some other way, what we're all going to have to do at the dictate of some unaccountable, unelected international body, and we're going to have to pay for it on top of it. Have I got that about right?
Absolutely, and you hit one very important point. We're going to go to the polls in November, and we're going to hold people accountable. In America, we'll be able to hold, well, not Cuomo, he's not running, but in Michigan, we'll be able to hold Governor Whitmer accountable for her miserable performance. In Florida, the people of Florida will be able to hold Ron DeSantis accountable for what he brought to the free state of Florida. But we will be able to hold them accountable for their performance and the results that they delivered or did not deliver. Tedros wants an unaccountable World Health Organization that can pass dictates to all of us, and we will have no mechanism to hold him accountable.
This is unconscionable. I'm so glad that you've raised a warning here about it, Congressman Pete Hoekstra, and I know that we will be discussing it further and taking action, notably with our Committee on the Present Danger China, because China will be one of the principal beneficiaries of this arrangement, you can be sure. It's part of its global domination scheme, using Tedros, one of its puppets, to help effect it. We'll fight it on the beaches. We'll fight it in the streets, as they say. Congressman, you're a great American. We're delighted to have you with us. Come back to us again with updates soon, if you would. Welcome back. I'm delighted to say we're joined by one of our country's foremost experts on a part of the world that has been a flashpoint in the past and might yet be again Korea. Her name is Dr. Tara Oh. She is also a former colonel in the United States Air Force and is today the founder and president of a terrific organization, the East Asia Foundation. We wanted to catch up with her to talk, among other things, about the threats that have been emerging of late again from the North Korean regime of Kim Jong un. Dr. O, it's good to have you with us. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, Greg.
Let's start with this spate of missile tests that have taken place in just the past few months. In 2022, I believe there have been 9 of them, including hypersonic missile tests, a technology that we don't have in our inventory at the moment, alas. The possibility, I'm told, of a nuclear test underground may also be in the offing. What's going on, and how serious a danger do you think it represents?
I think North Korean regime is continuing its trend. I think before we analyze each individual test, I think we need to step back a little bit and look at why it's doing what it's doing. And to do that, we have to look at its goals, its stated goals. It has stated that its goal is to unify Korea under its rule, under its totalitarian communist system. So, in order to achieve that,
By force, if necessary, right?
yes, exactly, by subversion, by coercion, by force, and of course, by force, we that was the Korean War from 1950 to 53. But even prior to that, there were a lot of subversive activities going on after South Korea, Republic of Korea was born, which was 1948. And then it eventually led to the unification effort by force, which was Korean War from 50 to 53. And then after that, it actually the subversive part, the unconventional warfare part, still continued, and it continues on to today. And developing nuclear weapons is part of its arsenal of weapons, um, not just in a nuclear sense, but its tool that it has to achieve its objective, which is to unify Korea under its rule.
On its terms, indeed. The previous government of Moon Jae-in, the now outgoing president of South Korea, was quite interested in achieving the goal of unification as well, and seemed to be willing to do so pretty much on the North's terms. Um, Fortunately, I think it's fair to say that general attitude has been repudiated by the people of South Korea in the poll that has now replaced him with a conservative. Talk about the new leadership and what its policy approach is likely to be, and whether the difference will be quite, um, important to the future security of not only South Korea but our interests in the region as well.
Yeah. Um, yes, Moon Jae-in, the outgoing president, whose last day is on the 9th of May, um, he has been pursuing this unification that is, as you said, under North Korea's terms. And if people really understood what that really meant, which means a life without freedom, I don't think there would be anybody who would agree to it. The only reason why there was some support, like majority didn't, but um, some of the people who supported felt that they were deceived into thinking that that's the way to peace. And it isn't. It's that you have peace through strength, which is what we used to have, through alliance and through strong military and the strength that it has, not giving up on its own sovereignty. But that's not what Moon Jae meant. So I think we're actually glad to move away from that, and people have spoken. With the incoming Yoon administration, um, we still have couple of weeks left, and the ruling party they still have the majority in the National Assembly, and they have been trying to pass all kinds of laws, and they have passed all kinds of laws without any opposition. So it's in effect one party state in a way, and that party is still trying to do that.
Not without any opposition. Just to clarify, it sounds as though it's not that there isn't an opposition. It's just that the opposition has not been able to prevail. Is that right?
No, because exactly, ruling party has the numbers. It has enough numbers to pass the laws, and that's the problem. So, except it can't change the constitution because it requires two-thirds majority. But it has in others, it doesn't require two-thirds majority, so they're able to pass other types of laws. But the latest one that they're trying to pass is basically taking away all the investigative authority from the prosecutors and giving that to the police. And people are up in arms over that. And why at this last minute? And they're trying to present this to Moon Jae-in by the 3rd of May. So that's while he's still in office. And a lot of people say that it's because they have committed so many crimes that they don't want to be investigated. So they're just going to try to change the law so they can stay above the law.
They were perfectly happy, of course, in the past to use the investigative powers against their political adversaries, but they don't want it applied to them, obviously. This is a fascinating, and again, it's, well, I think a God thing that the people of South Korea not only voted against a continuation or even perhaps a worsening of the policies of the previous government, the outgoing Moon government, um, but they have elected someone who is apparently committed to this different philosophy of peace through strength. One example of a change of policy, I guess, is there will be no further pursuit of this so-called end of war agreement, which was a sort of idée fixe, a preoccupation of President Moon. Is that the case? That what might well have actually triggered a renewal of the Korean War is not now in prospect?
I think when it comes to foreign policy, I think he has a pretty good foreign policy team. And they have basically gone back to what South Korea really needs, which is the strengthening of the alliance with the United States. They're about to restart the combined military exercise again, which has been on a hiatus since Moon Jae-in came into power. So, and for military, if you do not exercise, then you cannot prepare and you cannot be ready. And readiness is important. It's like an insurance. It's not because you expect it to happen 100% or 80% or even 50%. Even if it's 1%, it's very dangerous, and that's why you have to be ready. And so they're going back to that posture of readiness and this peace through strength, this combined strength. So I'm glad to see that in the foreign policy aspect. Um, Domestic side, I'm not sure. I think we have to watch a little bit, but foreign policy and alliance, I think it's going in the right direction.
Good. Well, and if that uh, end of war idea is over the side, I think that will be a very positive development indeed. Let me ask you in closing, Tara O, there was an interesting development. The so called Blue House, the corresponding facility to our White House, apparently is going to be turned into a museum because the new president, Yoon Suk Yeol, is not going to operate out of it. Tell us why that is and whether this is a positive step in terms of the national security of South Korea.
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2, 3 weeks ago, President-elect Yoon announced that his office will not be at the current Blue House location, which is actually a house with a blue roof, which is why it's called Blue House. But he and his staff, so entire office of the president, will be moving to the current Ministry of National Defense building in Yongsan. So it's actually going to be, and then the MND, the Ministry of National Defense offices will move to next door, which is owned by the current ROC JCS, Joint Chiefs of Staff, and JCS will then move to somewhere else. But anyway, so that's the arrangement. And the stated reason was that he wants, they see that the Blue House to be symbol of presidential power, a very strong presidential power, and they wanted it to be more of a open and communicating and with the public. So that's a stated reason. But I think the real reason is security. And what I mean by that is that the Blue House probably has a lot of bugs and existing staff. There's apparently about 1,000
Bugs meaning listening devices.
yeah, not listening devices, and of course, there are some methods to mitigate that. But if I mean, so that's a concern, and it could be listened to, I mean, maybe by the Chinese, could be North Korea even, or even the current power that's there. So I think security reasons, and then also among the Blue House staff, that's sort of permanent. There could be some people who are more loyal to the current power. So I think that's the real reason.
We saw a lot of that, of course, in connection with the transition from President Obama, rather, to President Trump, didn't we? A lot of holdovers who turned out not to have the best interests of the successor president in mind, and we wouldn't want that to happen to our friends in South Korea. Tara, we have to leave it at that for the moment. Thank you very much for your time and your great expertise on these matters. I commend to all of our listeners the East Asia Foundation as a great resource on the Korean Peninsula and more. God bless you, my dear. Come back to us again soon if you would. Next up, we'll speak with Captain Hung Kao, a retired United States Navy captain and special operator, about the condition of our military. We're back. It's a very distinct pleasure to say we are joined by a man I've gotten to know recently and have had the privilege of interviewing on a previous occasion here at Securing America, but I'm very happy to have a chance to visit with once again, having heard him conducting a terrific interview recently with my friend and now his, Steve Bannon, in the course of which he talked about not only his personal experience with building the Navy's budget when he was serving as a captain in the United States Navy, but also some of the implications of the inflation disaster that is now upon all of us. We're all feeling it, but the military is going to feel it in a very pronounced way as well. His name is Captain Hung Kao. He is a veteran now, having recently retired from the Navy after 2 decades of service there, as I recall. He has been a special operator, a deep sea diving one at that, a very hazardous line of work, and one in which he has both served and commanded with very considerable distinction. He's happening, as it happens, running for Congress at the moment, and we're going to visit with him about some of the things that have impelled him to do so. It's a delight to have you back, Captain Hung Kao. Welcome once again to Securing America.
Frankie, thank you so much for having me today. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
And for me too. I wanted to start with what you talked about with Steve, and that is, given what is now being calculated to be the impact of inflation on the Navy's and the rest of the military's budget this year, what is the difference between what was budgeted for inflationary creep and what is actually befalling the U.S. Defense Department?
Well, thank you so much for having me on that. Again, I had the I don't want to say pleasure of having to write the Navy's budget for 2 years. A wish I would never wish on anybody else.
Hard work.
It's yes, sir. It's painful days and nights at the Pentagon. But everybody's always picking on the DoD. It's like the chubby kid that everybody wants to pick on because they're like, oh, you get all this money. Because you gotta understand the $4 trillion in our national budget. A lot of it is fenced off for lot of social programs that they just won't. They will never
What are
touch
called
it to. Yes,
entitlements.
sir.
Right.
Yeah, and so the only thing left is really the DoD budget, which is $700 billion. But most of that is also fenced off as well because it's about manpower, it's training, it's upkeeping for our people. It costs a lot for medical and moving people every 2 years, and so then you're
But
left
it's
with a
still
small sliver.
considered more discretionary spending.
Yes, sir, it is.
And certainly there are a couple of key parts of the budget that are especially so. And I think where you're going with this is those are likely to be most adversely impacted
Exactly.
by inflationary creep, right?
So every year when we write the budget, we expect a 2% inflation increase. But this year, right now, we're at 8.5%. So that's a 6.5 delta. And that in a $700 billion budget, that equates to about $46 billion. And in terms of ships and aircraft, we're talking about 4 aircraft carriers, or that's the same as 38 guided missile destroyers, or 335 F-35 Joint Strike Fighters. So these are the things we need out there in the South China Sea to patrol really the to conduct the Freedom of Navigation Act. And it's going to adversely affect our military because our ships are old, right? The Ticonderoga class cruisers are very old. A friend of mine just relinquished command of USS Normandy, and while he commanded that ship, he was underway probably a total of 2 weeks because when they went into yards, they came out of yards and they found holes in the fuel tanks because again, a 50, 60-year-old ship is going to have a lot of wear and tear. Salt water doesn't do well with metal, and so these ships are getting old and we need to replace them. And we can't replace them because we're hamstrung by a budget that 16 years of continuing resolutions. And with continuing resolutions, you can't do new starts. You can't start new projects for modernization or looking at new development of hypersonic weapons. Those are things we need in order to fight the next war.
Let me just explain this a little bit with you. A continuing resolution is often called a stopgap spending bill. It's because Congress can't do the job properly most years of getting the annual authorization and appropriations measures passed, even for the Defense Department, which I consider to be, and I think most of us do, absolutely critical to our national, well, security, obviously, but national interest. And what you're saying is that when you use that stopgap arrangement, you cannot put new things into the budget. You have to just continue doing what you've been doing more or less at the steady state. It's hard probably for the layperson to appreciate how devastating that is. Another piece of this, which I know you've been very concerned about and talking about a lot, is the importance of actually having some certitude in the planning process. A 2 year budget rather than an annual churn is vital, as well, among other things. Defense contractors make plans for what they're going to manufacture so that they can keep the costs relatively stable and manageable, as opposed to the herky jerky of a more erratic budgeting process. When you put all this together, Captain Cow, it sounds as though it's a formula for a less ready force, a force that has less modern equipment, and is not engaged in the kind of research and development that will keep us qualitatively, if not quantitatively, superior to our adversaries.
No, you're
Have
absolutely
I
right.
got that right?
Yes, you're absolutely right. So, the by the time they gave us the budget this year, it's at the mid-year execution mark. So, the fiscal year, the military fiscal year goes from October to October, right? So, halfway through in March, basically, uh, we have benchmarks we have to meet. Hey, you have to spend so much money by the mid-year. But this year we got the budget after the mid-year mark. So now they're hitting us because we didn't meet the the mid-year benchmarks, and it's like, wait, you just gave us the money. I don't care. You missed the mark. I mean, like, and then not only that, so the defense industry, their fiscal year starts in June, right? June to June.
Captain, I have to ask you to hold the thought. I apologize. We've run over time. Let me just take a quick break. We'll be right back with more with Captain Hung Kao right after this. We're back, and we're continuing this really important conversation with a distinguished veteran of the United States Navy, now a candidate for the United States Congress. His name is Captain Hung Kao, United States Navy retired. Captain, you were giving us a short course on the challenges of making the defense institutions of our country, governmental and private, um, work together to assure that we have the kind of military capabilities that we need. It sounds like pretty much the kind of thing you used to do in the military. Missions impossible. How should we sort of reckon with the financial constraints and the budgeting difficulties in the Congress and beyond?
It's a simple solution. Just pass a 2-year defense budget. Like that, we can plan ahead, and we can anticipate these changes and the mid-year marks. And it really helps out the defense industry. It helps out our innovation. It helps with research and development. I mean, we need hypersonic weapons. And for those that don't know, hypersonics are anything that goes above Mach 5. And we have one right now that we're working on called conventional prompt strike, which goes Mach 17. That means I can launch a missile from Washington, D.C., and it'll hit San Diego in 16 minutes.
Well, I
And
hope
that's what we
not.
need. Well, I
Something,
know.
someplace else would be better,
No, no.
obviously. But I take the point that these are high-speed weapons that we don't have any of in the inventory at the moment, and the Russians, the Chinese, even the North Koreans do. So this is a very important example of a shortfall that has to be addressed. Let me talk more generally, if I could, Captain Cow, with you about the challenges that the military is facing more generally. You're a recently retired veteran. You've had, as a result, experience working for this commander in chief, working within this administration, as I recall. And I'm anxious to get your sense of whether what I would characterize as a war against the military by our own government is having material and deleterious effects on morale, on the esprit de corps, the unit cohesion, the readiness, and therefore the deterrent capabilities of our armed forces. Talk us through that, if you would.
Yes. So, I mean, besides having ships that can't get underway, planes that can't fly, and submarines that can't dive, you also have a military that's becoming more woke, right? I mean, there a lot of our trainings now towards just the wokeness of the military and how
Critical
white
race
supremacy.
theory and
Yes,
the
sir.
like.
Exactly. And it's just wrong. I mean, we need to be preparing our men and women to fight the fight. I mean, when I'm in the trenches, in a foxhole, I don't care what the person next to me looks like. I just care that they can shoot straight, and that's all that we care about in combat. And unfortunately, when you have a commander in chief who got 5 deferments because of asthma for the Vietnam War, he doesn't understand what it's like to wear the cloth of our nation. And it's heartbreaking, right? I mean, besides that, also the largest purge of Christians out of the military is through this vaccine mandate. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I just believe in the freedom of religion. And these thousands of soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen who are getting kicked out of military because their religious rights are being violated because they put in for religious exemptions are not being met. And it's hard. So you're getting hit by all sides. I mean, think about it. A person who wants to transition, because they go through psychotropic drugs, they can't carry a weapon for 2 years.
This
So in a
is
4-year
this is
enlistment, this person,
sexual transgender
yes, sir.
transitions you're talking about.
Right. So a person who wants to enlist and then decide, hey, I want to be a different sex now, and we have to pay for it. they're under psychotropic drugs where they can't carry or touch a weapon or deploy for 2 years. But yet, a military person who served 18 years honorably all of a sudden gets kicked out without retirement, without benefits to his family because they refuse to take a vaccine that they don't believe in.
This is a travesty. It really is, and it can only be corrosive for the only military that we have. And sadly, as we talk about on this program, as you know, Captain Cow, every day we're in a world in which that military has to be at peak fighting capability because well, hopefully it'll help deter conflict, but if not, it will be necessary to prevail in it. You are what I call a foreign born American patriot. Your experience, your life experience, has given you a sense of not only the character of this country and its uniqueness, its exceptional quality, but also how perishable freedom is. Take just a minute to talk a little bit about that because it informs everything I think you've done to date and that you're hoping to do, and also I think the anguish that you clearly are expressing in your previous comments.
Yes, sir. So, the waking up one day and not having a flag to stand under or a country to call your own is a devastating feeling. And I swore to myself my kids would never ever, go through that. And that's why I
And
served,
you had this
you know,
experience in your native
yes, sir.
Vietnam, South
Right.
Vietnam.
As a Vietnamese refugee, we came here with nothing but just the United States took us in. It gave us this ladder of opportunity, but we still had to climb up ourselves, right? I mean, no one expects to be handed things for life. We did the hard work and we learned, and I paid back this country through my service, and that's why again my service is not over now. I'm looking at a different service, which is serving our country in Congress. But again, it's hard for our military. I mean, especially by a commander in chief who's never served and a chairman joint chief staff who wears makeup. We're just we are hamstrung by people who just don't love this country as much as we do. And I think it's time for some the foreign born, as you said, or immigrants to remind America how fragile freedom is.
Well, you are an exceptional example of that character. And it has, I know, been of great importance to our military to have people like you serving in it, including at the Naval Academy. And we appreciate your willingness to continue to serve in these other capacities. If you had the opportunity to speak to this commander in chief about the necessity of reversing some of these policies, what priorities would you assign to course corrections, sir?
The first thing is I have to remind him what Ronald Reagan said is America has never been attacked because we're too strong. It's only when we're weak. And the weakness is in these woke, ideologies, and then just not funding the military properly. And we got lower inflation because the inflation, like I said, is starting us with a $46 billion deficit.
Captain, we have to leave it at that. This is such important work. We look forward to talking with you further about it. Stay well. I thank the rest of you for listening and hope you'll do so again tomorrow. Same time, same station. Over and out.